My good family, I want you to imagine something. Just imagine hating black people so much that you are willing to burn your own house down, you know, just to smoke them out. Because that's exactly what many white Americans finally confessed. That's exactly what white Americans, Latinos, and any other groups just confessed. Why they voted against black people. You know? Why they voted against themselves. Not against black people. They voted against themselves.
Amazed how people vote against their own interest. I'm always amazed at that.
It is. I think it speaks to the extent to which politics or maybe government, people don't have that strong a feeling about. They don't really, either they don't connect the dots or they don't care about the dots. That is, even if this means that they're, something, the provision of health care, some benefits that they might either receive, that they might receive, would go down. They don't trust the person who would give them more, and they prefer to be led by someone who would give them less.
Right.
I'd like to think it's a sort of rational decision to do that, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just people going with their gut and deciding, I don't like Hillary. I'm not sure that I like Trump, but I don't like Hillary, so I'm voting for Trump, even if that might mean that some things that Hillary would do for me would make my life a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think, in fairness to everyone, I think that one of the tough things is people don't really know the issues that well. People are not reading like they used to. They're not reading newspapers. They're all gone. They're, getting their news from Facebook, and they're tired. They come home. Right. And so it's just easier to be affiliated with a party, be a part of that party, and if they tell me I'm for this issue, then fine, I'm for this issue.
Yeah, I think it's been like that for an extremely long time. It's just our connections to the party are much different than they used to be. I think that people would be connected to the party in part because of their parents, or in part because of their union, or their neighborhood, or some other thing that was besides Facebook or Fox News or MSNBC or whatever it is that they pay attention to. And those kinds of ties that we might have had before have broken or no longer exist. So people are still voting for their team without really understanding things, which I think was true back then as well. But their relationship with that team is somewhat different than it used to be.
They voted against their own future. They voted against their own children, only to punish black Americans. Let's watch this clip.
Oh why do poor white people vote against themselves time and time again? They vote for Trump and the other MAGA politicians only to have every promise broken, prices go up, social supports evaporate. Here's why. First, remember what I talked about recently, the psychological wage of whiteness. That term was coined by W.E. Du Bois to describe poor white folks being paid with social status rather than decent living conditions. They're convinced by the elites that they're better than black folks, better than immigrants, Latinos, LGBTQ folks. They're convinced that being white puts them in the same league as the elites. Of course, the elites know otherwise, but the poor whites buy it because they're grasping at straws. Second, they are convinced that the people they're supposedly better than are the big threat in their lives. Not the rich, not the corporations or the politicians, but immigrants, black folks, welfare queens, LGBTQ, criminals, the usual scapegoats. Third, the elites promise protection to poor white folks. A politician comes along and says, I'll keep those people in their place, or I'll kick them out, or I'll lock them up. Or, more politely, I'll defend your values. They don't say, I'll make your life better. Well, they say it, they just don't mean it. They'll say, I'll make sure they don't get ahead of you. Fourth, they vote for the punishment, not the policy. When a law gets passed that slashes public housing or school funding or food aid, they think, good, that'll stop those lazy freeloaders. And they do some mental gymnastics that make them believe it's worth losing those things for their own families in order to see those problematic Black people and immigrants and so forth being punished. It gets to a point where just seeing those guys being punished is reward enough, which is pretty sick, but that's how behavior works. Their housing, schools, and groceries are on the chopping block too, but they blame that on Biden. Always a scapegoat. They get hit by the same policies they were told would punish the others, and they blame the wrong people. The system fails them, but they've been trained to blame the scapegoats, not the cause, which is the rich people, the people they voted for. So they think the problem is still those people, not the fact that they were personally manipulated by the people they voted for. They're basically saying, I'll take the hit as long as you don't help them, or worse, as long as you hurt them. That is the psychological wage Du Bois was talking about, the trade-off between material security for racial status. And that's a crying shame, folks.
When the American empire finally collapses, historians won't be stunned by the greed of the elite. They will be stunned by the loyalty of the poor. That stopped me in my tracks. The working class didn't just vote against their own interests, they worshipped the billionaires robbing them. They slashed their own benefits, gutted their own healthcare, and cheered while the rich wrote off private jets as tax deductions. Not because it helped them, but because they were told it would hurt someone else. And that right there is how you rig a democracy without ever breaking a single law. Some laws were broken, but this tweet makes such an important point. The greed of the elite is expected. What is not expected is the loyalty of the poor, of the working class, to those who are taking from them. That is what.
Why do conservatives vote against their own best interests and for these rich assholes who don't give a about us? Hi, my name is Keegan and I talk about the psychology of politics. Get real. Your interests, your standard of living, it's not just about how well you're doing on money. Some interests are emotional. Conservative voters will take a politician that makes the rich richer and screws them over on housing, healthcare, their paycheck, if it means that politician postures as a strongman who will protect them from crime, immigrants, the gay agenda. Doesn't matter that violent crime goes up under Republicans and down under Democrats. It's all about the feeling of safety. But some conservative voters go even further. At the top of their list of interests is hurting the people that make them feel afraid, insecure, disgust. Conservative voter feels rejected by women, or is so afraid of women's rejection that they don't even try. So they elect politicians to take away women's freedom. Immigrants and black people make them feel afraid. Elect politicians to hurt them. Gay and trans people trigger this feeling of disgust. Elect Republicans because they'll stop people from being that way. The sad reality is that your average right-winger would rather be miserable and poorer, so long as the powerful are making the people that they don't like miserable and poorer as well. By the way, the centrist Dems who voted for Biden over Bernie also voted for a rich asshole who doesn't give a about any of us because those voters were afraid. When you're dominated by fear,
really do right themselves, because 3 days ago, did I not just say this in my video? Many Americans who voted for the talking orange believe that rules for thee and not for me is how things are going to play out, and it's just not. There are many Americans who are waking up to find out that their lives are going to be impacted by this. Many of them are effing around and finding out the hard way. And now look at the Republicans, effing around and finding out.
I'm Hispanic and I vote for Mr. Trump. We vote for Mr. Trump. Yes, Mr. Trump. We love you. We love you. On the way to the White House.
Beyond betrayed. They used us. They actually, during the campaign, and I don't want to make this political, but during the campaign, the elected officials from the Republican Party, they actually told us that he was not going to touch the documented people.
So I admit, I regret my vote for Donald Trump. I regret it because I needed these changes sooner. I needed the prices to go down sooner so that I didn't drain out my bank accounts and go into crippling credit card debt.
All right, you shady motherfucker, listen up and listen good. I voted for you because of your no tax on overtime bill, amongst other things. But here's the deal. I just read your great big beautiful bill, and it's bullshit.
As easy as it would be for me to say that I wasn't thinking when I voted or that I don't watch the news, I had to ask myself the same question that hundreds of you are asking me, is why did I vote the way I did? I've spent the last few days reflecting, and I feel like I came through some sort of revelation.
You know why we voted for Donald Trump? Because the middle class man finally thought he was going to get ahead in life. You said no taxes on overtime. Big, bold, beautiful letters. We thought, hell yeah, why would we not vote for that? Then you turn around and pass the bill and it's a crock of shit. It's a tax credit for the people that make a certain amount of money. Of course, when you put it in big, bold, beautiful letters, it looks great. We're going to vote for you. And you knew what you were doing. You were baiting people in saying, no taxes on overtime. You didn't give no fucking details. Your details that we read.
All I can say, I was a dumbass, voted for Trump only because of my beliefs. People around me encouraged it. I can think for myself, yes. But I felt at the time that was the better choice. Now I'm looking at it with everything going on. It was the worst decision I ever made. I wanted not to vote.
I was a MAGA junkie.
A MAGA junkie who thought her government job would be safe with Donald Trump in office. She was wrong.
I cried. It's scary, you know, it's a really scary thing. And I was embarrassed. He's a good boy.
Higgett was abruptly fired last month from the Treasury Department's Bureau of Fiscal Service, based here in Parkersburg, West Virginia. The reason given for the firings of 125 probationary employees at the Bureau? Poor performance.
If you could say anything to President Trump now, what would you say? I expected better from you. I really did. I expected that you would do what was right and cut waste and fraud and all of those things that you promised us before we elected you in office, but you're not doing that. You're creating a disaster, and I don't know what America's going to look like if this continues.
I know you told me you voted for President Trump. What were you hoping that he would do?
I was hoping he would did something that made sense regarding the economy, made some kind of progress in bettering, you know, the benefits of being a veteran. But I mean, it just seemed like he actually cared about doing what was best for the country. But now it just feels like all about me, Donald Trump, not, you know, the guy out there working in the trenches trying to make ends meet, trying to pay the mortgage, trying to pay the bills. You know, it goes against everything I expected when, you know, I voted for him.
I just need someone to explain something to me. I live in Alabama, and my utility bill usually averages between $200 and $250 a month. Can someone please explain to me how my utility bill went from $250 a month to $696 this month? Could someone just please explain that to me? I know it was cold last month, but $696? Explain.
It's the reason why, ultimately, I believe that Donald Trump won his election in 2016. Poor and working people in low-income white communities saw him as an alternative to the establishment. And poor and working African-American people realized that the establishment probably was not going to be working for them, so they stayed home. Now, there's a lot of ways to talk about this election, but I want to tell you a story about my own aunt and uncle. They lived most of their life in the middle of the state of Michigan, Montcalm County, between Montcalm County and St. Louis, Michigan. And they're two of my favorite people. They're the folks who would take us snowmobiling in the winters, water skiing in the summers, taught me what a mustard pretzel was. My uncle would go as far as to learn how to prepare venison halal so that my family could eat it when he'd go hunting. This is not somebody who's motivated by anti-Muslim animus in any way. They loved me, my brother Osama, my sister Semya, as much as they loved any of our cousins. Both my aunt and uncle voted for Donald Trump. Now, you got to imagine the awkward conversation that ensued. But for them, they thought about it this way. If you go and see a doctor, you're between one doctor who tells you that the pain you're feeling isn't real at all, and it's all going to be okay. Trust us, we're going to get it right this time. And one doctor who tells you that your pain, in fact, is real, and the reason why is something you've never heard of before, or something somebody's been telling you your whole life, maybe not in clear words. If you're that patient, who do you pick? Now, you can look at that and say, how in God's name can you ignore the clear bigotry, the clear racism coming out of that man for the 2 years before he got elected president? How can you ignore that? Well, W.E.B. Du Bois writes about the experience of people of color, specifically the experience of African Americans. In The Souls of Black Folk, he writes about this idea of a double conscious, right? And that's the notion that folks who inhabit minority identities have to walk through the world appreciating the world and also appreciating how the world appreciates them. And it's a psychological burden that we carry. And put simply, people like my aunt and uncle have never actually had to pay attention to that. It's never been something that they've thought about or had to. And if at all, it's secondhand, second-order information. And so they end up having the privilege of ignoring it. And to them, the existential threat of the challenges that they face economically, juxtaposed on the argument that one might ask them to keep doing the same thing they've been doing for so long, puts them in a position where they make a choice. I disagree deeply with the choice that they made. But I think it behooves us to ask ourselves why they made the choice. Second argument, though, is that the very fabric of our society, what has brought us together and forced us to look one another in the eye across these differences of race or socioeconomic position or access or opportunity, that civil society that Alexander de Tocqueville talked about when he talked about our American democracy, where is it today? We've allowed the internet to literally trump our lived experiences and the kinds of civil society that we used to rely on. Whether it was a bowling league or church or a union hall, those shared institutions that we long held dear, those institutions, they don't attract people like they used to. Worse, those policies that set in place the Flint water crisis, that segregate us, we're starting to see the deep pernicious consequences in terms of racial residential segregation. If you're white in this country, the median white person lives in a neighborhood where 75% of their neighbors are white. The median person of color lives in a neighborhood where 65% of their neighbors are people of color. I want you to think about what it looks like to cross the southwest boundary of Detroit. Just in crossing the street, you go from 85% black to 85% white. The consequence of our recession on both of those communities were dire, certainly more dire in Detroit, given the added burden of racism, both structural and institutional. But nobody did very well during the recession. The problem is that nobody saw the other not doing very well. In opens the door for somebody saying to poor working white folks, well, the reason you don't have is because they have. The reason you're suffering is because of them. And when we don't share experience, we can't stress test those arguments in our daily life. And beyond our actual physical segregation, right now, our ideological segregation has never been worse. Right now, our media is so driven by how many eyeballs it can attract, how many clicks it can pull, that it's more focused on justifying our preconceived assessment of the world than it is on actually giving us information. And so if you were to scroll a liberal Facebook feed or a conservative Facebook feed, the very information that you see on which you're making decisions is fundamentally different. And so not only are you not seeing the lives of people who look different than you, but you're reading a take on what's happening in those communities that is built to justify and ratify and verify your preconceived notions and the arguments that people make about what's happening over there.
Welcome back. Now, for decades, black thinkers, black scholars, black historians, they have told us that white America will choose whiteness over survival every time, any day, any time. And I've seen that. That is the reality, because when black people warned everyone about voting for DJT inside, they didn't listen to that, or they knew. They knew who DJT is because on the first term of DJT, he was their president, and they did not want him back. So they voted him out, or they took in Biden. It's because they did not want him. And now DJT came back with this other contestant, and they were again, no. We better take this, our white dude. We better take this dude because he doesn't like black people. Okay? Interviews, podcast, forum, community meetings, and political roundtable are filled with white voters literally saying that, I know this party hurts me, but I don't want black people. Okay? And the fact that you can go to an extent of hurting even your own children just to make the other person regret, it makes me feel like black people we don't have friends, you know? And let me say something. White fear has nothing to do with online. White fear has nothing to do with online. White fear has nothing to do with culture. White fear has nothing to do with economics. But it has everything to do with what? With the fear of losing an earned power. White fear it has everything to do with the white supremacy. White fear, it has everything to do with the losing of power. And Dr. Francis Cress warned people for decades ago that, and James Baldwin too, said things openly. You know, a lot of professors, a lot of great thinkers have talked about it. But now white voters are demonstrating with their own action. Okay? And the fact that they are going to the extent to destroy the economy or to weaken their retirement, to lose their rights and everything, as long as leaders promise to put black people on their place, to put black people back in their place, they're okay. And that's why when DJT said that he's going to bring America back to Americans, he's going to make America great again, he wasn't meaning that he's going to make America to be a good country, better than how it was. What he was doing, he was going to bring the racist behaviors back to the country. He was going to end DEI. He was going to end the equality. He was going to make white people feel like white people again. And that was his campaign. And they made him the president. They were so happy because he was going to bring America back. You know? And scholars have phrased this habit as sacrifice whiteness. It means that white people are willing to sacrifice anything. Okay? White people are willing to sacrifice their own well-being if preserves the racial hierarchy. An example is what we are seeing right now. Okay? Example is what we are seeing right now. Like, you find poor white supporters or poor white people supported slavery, even though they owned no slaves. Okay? Why? Because they wanted someone beneath them in the social order. Okay? White workers fought against unions if unions included black workers. Okay? Even when the union would raise their wages, but they just fought it. White farmers, they fought anything. You see how they are regretting. You know? White parents shut down public schools in the 1960s instead of letting black children in. Okay? Their own children lost education, but whiteness was preserved. On the other hand, white Americans oppose universal health care not because they don't like socialism, but because they don't want black families to get equal care. White voters reject student loans relief, even though they need it. But if it means that black Americans benefit too, no, we are done with it. We don't want that. And this is why they voted against themselves, because the hatred outweighed the logic. The fear outweighed the facts. The obsession outweighed the future. Okay? For example, the 2016 and 2020 blueprint, the voting against self-interest, it is an example. Because in both 2016 and in 2020, political scientists discovered a strange pattern. Okay? The poorer the white voter, the less educated the white voter, the more struggling white voter, the more likely they are to vote against their own needs. Okay? You will think poor white voters will vote for health care, for affordable housing, for food security, for job program, for public education, but no. They vote for politics or for policies that do not have nothing to do with them. Why? Because they believe any program that helps America will help black America too. And they will rather drown than to see black people breathe. That's how it is. And I wonder. I wonder that so much. Let me say this. Some of the exact confession white Americans have said recently, I've come across videos. They are saying that I didn't want my taxes helping them. okay? That we were losing control of the country. We don't want them to have power, okay? They are taking over entertainment, politics, sports. Enough is enough. These are such of the words they were talking about. And this is not about policies or politics. This is not about Democrats versus Republicans. This is about whiteness versus equality. And white voters are now openly admitting that equally feels like oppression to them. You know? And that's exactly what's happened. Equality feels like oppression. As I said, for example, I've been giving an example of white South Africans. White South Africans during apartheid, they were living good. You know? Some people were beneath them. But when equality came to pass, when apartheid ended, nobody's doing something bad to you. Nobody's taking away your things. But for you just seeing a black person sitting on the same table with me, it feels awkward to them. Because of equality, they feel oppressed. You know? So that is the reason why you may find some white people voting against their own interest because of what? Because they don't want black people to be equals to them. And that's why you see a lot of them are crying right now. You see a lot of black Americans are crying right now, are regretting their votes. You know, they're regretting they could not have voted for DJT. I've gone through the records of the voting of America, and I saw a lot of them, they voted against health care, but right now they are drowning in medical debts. They can't afford the medical. Only one checkup, it has ruined the family. Only a small accident, it has ruined a white family. They voted against student loan relief. Now their kids can't go to college. Their kids are stressed up. Their kids are turning to opium, are turning to drugs. They voted for candidates who destroy social safety nets. Now they are homeless, they are jobless, okay? And meanwhile, black Americans, they continue to rise. They are not falling, okay? Education is rising. Ownership is rising. Entrepreneurship is rising. African connection is rising. So black people have nothing to lose. Black people have been living under these conditions for decades. Black people have been living under tough conditions for decades. So even if you vote against them, this is not new to them. A lot of damage have been done to black Americans. And now they cannot be surprised with some things like this, okay? Now, the reason why white America are waking up right now, the reality, and it's because they thought that they were punishing black people, but they have ended up punishing themselves, okay? Many are now saying that we don't think it will get this bad. I've seen videos. This is for black people. I didn't know it will get here. I didn't know he would cut our benefits. I didn't know he only meant black people. I thought he only meant black people. Why us? So they're waking up to this reality that, damn it, we did the shit again. You know? And this, the most ironic part is that they believed oppression could be safety control. They believed harm could be targeted. They believed policies were only to hurt black people. But the system they built is now turning on them too. Oppression has no royalty. It devours everything around it. Okay? And that's an historical cycle repeating itself. History is repeating itself. And this is a pattern. We have seen this before. Even professors are saying, or they say that when you teach a man to dehumanize others, he'll eventually dehumanize himself too, or his kids. And white America normalize cruelty, they normalize selfishness, fear, suspicion, you know, hatred, lies. And now that culture is consuming them, you know. They weaponize their political choices, and that weapon is pointing back to them. You know, black Americans are keeping rising, even though they are in tough conditions, because black American or black people are unbreakable. So yes, they voted against black people for their own interest, but again, it is against them. It is eating them too. Tell me what you think on the comment section about this video. Until next time, peace out.